I'm Cody Daigle-Oriens, and welcome to StoryFest 2020. Due to the ongoing impacts of the coronavirus pandemic, StoryFest 2020 is going virtual. From September 15th through September 29th, StoryFest will premiere 13 live and pre-recorded author events, featuring top authors and creators in genre fiction, comics, young adult fiction, and middle grade fiction. This year, we have over 50 authors joining us from all across the country, and in cross-genre panels, they will explore the big ideas at the heart of telling stories in today's world. Even though we can't welcome you to the library's forum in person, we're glad to have you with us virtually. Thanks for being here, and enjoy StoryFest 2020.
Hi, and welcome, and thank you all for being with us this evening. My name is Alex Giannini, and I'm one of the program managers at the Westport Library. Tonight, we are so grateful to welcome back two dear friends of StoryFest. And while this isn't exactly how we envisioned our third year of the fest to look, what can you do? 2020, am I right? Running through September 29th, StoryFest will premiere 12 live and pre-recorded author events featuring top authors and creators in genre fiction, comics, young adult fiction, and middle grade fiction. This year, we have over 50 authors joining us from all over the country. And in some really incredible cross-genre panels, those authors will explore the big ideas at the heart of telling stories in today's world. Even though we can't welcome you to the library in person tonight, we're so glad to have you with us virtually, and we hope you enjoy everything that StoryFest has to offer. Two quick notes about tonight's program. First, you can buy copies of Don't Look for Me and The Silent Conspiracy using the link directly below me. And second, if you have a question for our authors, please use the Ask a Question feature directly below me, and we'll do our best to get to it tonight. And with that, let's get on to tonight's main event. Wendy Walker is the author of the psychological suspense novels All Is Not Forgotten, Emma in the Night Before, and her latest, Don't Look for Me. Her novels have been translated into 23 foreign languages and top bestseller lists both nationally and abroad. They have been selected by the Reese Witherspoon Book Club, The Today Show, and the Book of the Month Club, and have been optioned for both television and film. L.C. Shaw is the pen name of internationally best-selling author Lynne Constantine, who also writes psychological thrillers with her sister as Liv Constantine. Her family wonder if she is actually a spy and never knows what to call her. When editing her work, she loves to procrastinate by spending time on social media, and when stuck on a plot twist, has been known to run ideas by her silver Labrador and golden retriever who wish she would stop working and play ball with them. Her work has been translated into 27 languages and is available in over 31 countries. Her latest, The Silent Conspiracy, is out now. So please join me in welcoming Wendy Walker and L.C. Shaw.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. How are you tonight? Thanks for joining us. So there are no moderators because Lynn and I have known each other for a while, and we're very capable of having a conversation for much more than an hour. We're just going to have a talk about our new books, which both released yesterday. And I'm going to kick it off by talking a little bit about my novel, Don't Look for Me, which I think I have here. It looks like this. And I'm just going to give you the elevator pitch for it. And then we'll do a deeper dive into all the issues and great stuff in both of the books. And then Lynn will do the same. So Don't Look for Me is a story of Molly Clark, wife and mother, who disappears 2 hours from home in a small town. And after a 4-day search, they come to believe that she's walked away from her life. She's had a very difficult 5 years, family tragedy that occurred with the death of a child. And this is the anniversary of that death. And it's just a very traumatic day for many reasons. And they also find a note indicating that she wants to disappear. So 2 weeks later, her daughter, Nicole, gets a new lead, and she decides that she's going to return to this small, economically depressed town and find her mother at all cost. And so she does, and she encounters secrets and lies and deception and ends up in more danger than she could have ever imagined. It's told in both narrations, so you get to be with Molly hour by hour and day by day of her walking away, and then her attempt to get back home, and then her abduction. and you get to be with her daughter. The same thing, out day by day, hour by hour, as she searches for her mother 2 weeks later. So the time frames eventually converge, all is revealed, and hopefully it's a great thrill ride with a big emotional punch.
It absolutely is, and it's one of my favorite books of 2020. I had the pleasure, as you know, of getting an early copy, and I read it in, I think, 1 day, 2 days maybe. It had me really nervous. I was texting you saying, things better work out okay, because Molly, I really felt like I was with her in the jeopardy that she was in, and it was such I think, an emotionally complex book too, which really, all of the issues she was dealing with, the family issues, the mother-daughter issues, the great, without giving anything away, the deep sense of loss for things that had happened in her life. So it resonated with me on so many levels, not just as a really edge-of-your-seat thriller, which it definitely is, but also just a really good story about family and about trauma and about, really recovery and moving on. So I thought it was amazing.
Thank you. Now tell us. But thank you.
So my book,
I really do.
I mean it. I love that book. So my book is The Silent Conspiracy, and this is the second in a series with Jack Logan and Taylor Parks, who are 2 investigative reporters. And even though they are each written to be read as standalones, they don't have to be read in order. The Silent Conspiracy does pick up where the network left off. So the network was Jack and Taylor sort of coming back together after being separated for a long time to united against a common enemy. And they think they've defeated that enemy when the Silent Conspiracy begins. But of course, they haven't. The reader knows a little bit more in this book than the characters know. So the reader's aware that this Damon Cross, who is the antagonist, is very much still alive. Jack and Taylor have no idea. They are each pursuing their own stories. Jack is trying to figure out why everyday normal people are suddenly becoming homicidal and then killing themselves. And Taylor is working on a story about a lawsuit against an insurance company. And so as they're working together with this, Damon has other plans, and their other parts of their lives are put in jeopardy until everything sort of comes together and they wake up to that jeopardy, and then you have to see what happens in the story. So
yeah, and
that's The Silent Conspiracy.
And so both books, which I have read, are so different from your psychological thriller life. They are,
yes.
They reminded me, it was like going back to the John Grisham era, and Dan Brown, and it's really in that realm of, a conspiracy drama, like a really traditional conspiracy drama, but updated, obviously, to be very current. And again, with these characters, and I love that the characters stay in both books because you become attached to them, you root for them, they're great protagonists, you root for them and their relationship, and so it's really a great, like, having a series with that Dan Brown kind of conspiracy element to it, I think is just like a magic formula. It's really, it just makes you want to know what's going to happen to them. And then, of course, the door's always left open for more, which is
right.
And so I'm really curious. There's so many things that I know that the watchers don't know, right? Just
right.
like
many things.
Many
yes.
things I know that everyone, I think everyone should know, because many people know you, as writing with your sister as Lynne Constantine. But you actually, when we first met for lunch years ago, and we both talked about how we had been writing forever. We have many drawer novels, or however,
right.
Someone else called them something else, but books that will never see the light of day. We've been writing for years, published before, but not successfully, or as successfully as we've managed to be lately. And this series, the network, was your baby. I feel like I really got out of our first conversation that you had a passion for that story and for Jack Logan that was still with you. And is that what drove you to still pursue it even after you had this amazing success with The Last Mrs. Parrish?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the network, which, has a couple different titles prior to it becoming the network, was a book that I worked on years before I even had my kids. And I was working in corporate marketing at the time, which is really how I got the idea for it, because I was just realizing how susceptible we all are to marketing and advertising and how behavior is shaped. And those were the first seeds of the book. And it went through so many iterations. And, I was busy with many other things. So I'd start it, I'd stop it, and I never really finished it. But it was always there. It was always this book that I knew that I had to write. And I did finish it before Valerie and I started writing together. But I had put it aside, and we were was focusing on that. I was pitching that to agents and trying to get representation, and we ended up getting represented with The Last Mrs. Parrish just as the network was kind of finishing up. So I had to shift gears, and then, as you know, I mean, everything was terrific with that, with Parrish and with everything after that. But it was something that I knew that I had to go back and finish, and so fortunately, HarperCollins was willing to publish that, and again, because it is different enough, it's still in the same thriller umbrella, but different enough, they didn't want confusion between Lynne Constantine and Lynne Constantine, which is the reason why I use the L.C. Shaw pen name, because a lot of people are like, why, what's with all these names? Why are you like all these different people? And that's the reason, so that someone who's expecting a psychological thriller doesn't pick this up, and then it's a conspiracy action thriller, and they're disappointed. But I knew that no matter what, I had to write this book, and it wasn't finished with the network. It could have stopped there, really. Mm-hmm. But these are characters that I really loved, and I was really happy to get back to spending time with them. And again, I'm planning at least one more book from this, because this book, it does end on a cliffhanger, which I didn't intentionally set out to do it that way, but it was really the only way that it could end. The story it was a natural, I felt, conclusion. So I feel an obligation to Jack and Taylor to write the next book, as well as to readers, because I know that, everyone, they're already saying, well, what's going to happen next? So, yeah.
Yeah. And the network really, I mean, it did end, but it ended with a cliffhanger. It definitely it was like, dun, 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 you really wanted to know what was going to happen next. And so I think it totally lent itself to being a series. And it's amazing how seamlessly you've been able to switch gears in terms of like the name recognition. Like, it's really, I don't think anyone's confused. Everyone knows who you are. They know, it's just been, you use the same picture. It's not like you're, concealing who you are. Some authors, they'll use a pen name and then they won't do any promotion until the book's out, and you don't know who it is, if it's even a man or a woman, and they've written other books, and it's just, I think it's really great the way you have managed to just have your pen name and just explain it, and people get it, and you can be multifaceted. So I used to write just general fiction. That's where I started out, and we had the same dilemma because, oh my gosh, many years. Actually, the first book I wrote was a legal thriller. It was a Grisham-esque. Well, I'll say it's a Grisham-esque.
I'm sure it was.
Grisham would agree it was Grisham-esque, but in my mind it was, because it was a legal thriller, and it had a lot of different characters, all written in third person, a lot of short chapters and different things going on, different plot lines. And that's what I had loved to read. So that's what I started writing when I decided I wanted to try to shift gears to being a writer. And then I got an agent. That book didn't sell. And then for whatever reason, I wasn't thinking, I need to stay in this genre, because the book didn't get picked up. So I was like fully immersed in suburban life, and I wanted to write about suburban culture and what it's like for women who, I was staying home with my kids. I was writing and trying to build this career, but I was relying on my husband for financial support while I was taking care of the kids. And that dynamic that was so pervasive in the suburbs. I really wanted to explore those issues. So I ended up writing 2 books that explored all of the dynamics of suburban culture. And they got picked up, they got published, but they didn't launch me into a lucrative career. And so I ended up shifting to writing thrillers just at the suggestion of a new agent that I got many years later. I'd stopped writing really. I did it a little bit, but it wasn't, I went back to practicing law. And
Right.
So I didn't give it up completely, but I kept writing in like sort of general fiction about women because that's what had got published, and I thought I had to stay there. And then my agent, I told her I really only had one more book in me, and she suggested I write a psychological thriller because it had exploded with Gone Girl was, Gillian Flynn, like I feel like I owe my life to her because she cracked open the demand. Like I don't think readers knew how much they wanted all of this dark stuff, and
Exactly.
she like fed them a little bit and they became ravenous for more, and they still are. It's like, and I am too. I mean, it's now it's really almost exclusively what I read. But anyway, so
Yeah.
but we had the dilemma. Do I publish under my name because I had these 2 other books, and would people be confused? And the decision was made to stay with my name, but because it had been like 8 years since my last book had been published, and we did. And it's interesting because they're not on my website, but they do come up in Google searches. And I have had some comments on, reviews and things where people have read those 2 books and they're like, wait a minute, like what? Like this is not.
So different, yeah.
And it's so, it's a little risky, right? You have to make that decision of what to do. But anyway, these, to tell us about there are threads of plot that go from the network into the silent conspiracy. I don't know how much you want to reveal about those themes with the coins and the lineage and any of that. What do you think is central to both books? What is driving them beyond obviously the characters, but what are the themes that you wanted to carry forward and that you think you would carry forward into another book?
I think one central theme is the idea of manipulation of the truth for personal agendas and personal gain. And so the idea of really, who can you trust? Who can you believe? Which is pretty much nobody in these books anyway. And the idea that it's very easy, especially today, to present something and make people believe one thing when a completely opposite thing can be true. So, the theme, and whether it's through legislature or, of course, advertising and marketing are the obvious things, but I think even entertainment, I think there's so many subtle messages. And I think the idea behind the network was that there was one person who was orchestrating all of that. So it's no coincidence that maybe when there's a bill being on the Senate floor to maybe cut health care for senior citizens or something, that there might be a show at the same time showing the benefits of euthanasia and this kind of thing, that all of these things can work in concert to sway public opinion, because, through story, as you think about it, we're all wired for that. So it's very easy to do that. And so the network, that was the main thrust of the network, was sort of being careful about believing everything that you read or everything that you see, and to really think beyond that. And then in the silent conspiracy, some of that does come forward, where you have media manipulating a story and shifting it. So that's that kind of fake news component a little bit. But I think also, again, it's about looking at issues and what's a slippery slope. So things that may seem like a no-brainer, all of these things that we grapple with in society, that they really aren't. Allocating resources, again, healthcare is a big theme in this book, because there's a big lawsuit against this insurance company for denying things. And then in terms of Jack's story, making these people who are going crazy, who have like a normal life, it's so easy again to create a narrative around them and make it look like they're bad people when really there's other things going on. So I think it's like a long-winded way of saying it, truth and really kind of looking under the covers and figuring out what's really going on would be behind it. And I think we know in politics or in any powerful, it's very hard. I mean, the old saying, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. I think it's as true today as it ever was. And not that I'm saying everybody in power is corrupt. There are a lot of good people that are doing that. But I think you just have to do your research and sort of know what's going on. I mean, we're living in a society where one tweet, right, can ruin someone's reputation.
Yeah.
It could be something that isn't even true. And so I hope that people would be cautioned to just look into things a little bit more and make sure before jumping on a bandwagon, right, that what they're reading or what they're hearing is actually true.
Yeah, and I think what is so interesting about our culture now, and this is not to get into politics at all, but just really everything has become about storytelling, and we have become so accustomed to receiving all of our information through the stories. So, and they are stories that, and we can search for the stories that appeal to us, that either entertain us or that confirm what we would like to believe, or that confirm things that make our life choices more convenient or guilt-free or whatever it is. And we can go out and find that. We can find those stories. And, the news used to be, Dan Rather and Peter Jensen. Right. And it was so boring. I remember when I was younger and my parents were watching the news, and it was so boring. It was monotone. There was no storytelling. It was just, here are the facts.
Exactly. Just the facts.
And I actually find myself gravitating towards stations like Bloomberg does a pretty good job of it. I watch a lot of financial news, but they have one guy who comes on who has that monotone voice, and he's very factual. To my ear, he's not biased. There's no up or down or, it's just, and then this happened today, and you can't read anything into what I'm saying.
That's good.
Not throughout the entire sentence. You're like, okay, but there's something that soothes me about that, because then I'm not, like you said, I'm not questioning, okay, is this a biased report? Is this, this is clearly, it was presented in a very opinionated way just by the way it was phrased or whatever. So I think there's a lot to that. And I love that concept in books. And one of the things that I love to play with in my books is misperception of people. Uh-huh. So not necessarily of bigger issues like politicians or, bills that are being passed and things like that, but of people. And I love to examine that through the sort of psychological dynamics of sociopathic illness, which is, as you well know, it's a wide range. They're on a separate, they're called axis 2 disorders. So they're not in the same category as the chemical disorders like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, even anxiety and depression. They are a different family of disorders, and they're based all on this lack of empathy. And there are different degrees of empathy and the lack thereof that they have. But it's an inability to relate to other human beings. And as a result, lying to them has no, it doesn't exist, because a lie requires caring about telling someone else something that's not true and then feeling bad about it. But if facts are nothing more than tools to getting what you want, then you're going to use, a sociopathic person will use whatever facts are relevant and useful in that moment to achieve the goal. And there's they don't attach any moral judgment upon themselves. And so it's hard to detect, because if I lie to someone, I might get shifty-eyed or start.
Right.
But people who have this, who are on this spectrum, are excellent liars, because aren't having those reactions, because they're not having those emotions of guilt and remorse and will I be found out, and they're not having the emotions, so it's not manifesting physically. Anyway, that I love playing with that in my books. And don't look for me. The main characters are perfectly normal. They're
right, which is a switch, right? Yeah, yes.
They're not unreliable narrators. The only issues they have is really the guilt and the grief over the loss of this child and the family that they can't get past, and it's really, it was a trauma that they haven't worked through, and they have suffered tremendously because of it. But the other characters in the town, in this very economically depressed town, families that have been there forever, have grown up in many, iterations of aunts and uncles and, different generations. They all know each other's secrets, and some of them have had really not ideal upbringings and have these strains of, sociopathic abilities or tendencies, and are able to lie quite well. So when Nicole goes there, she's faced, she doesn't know who to believe, because one person will tell her one thing, and then somebody else will tell her something else that's different about that person and why they might be lying. And she's really caught in this web of not knowing who to believe. So it's very similar. It's just on a very personal level. But you're right. There's something very unsettling about not knowing what you can believe and not believe.
Right. And when you're a person that's not a sociopath, right, it's very difficult to understand why somebody would lie or why somebody would behave in that way. And we're inclined to want to believe people, right? We don't want to think the worst of people. And I think with Nicole, again, that having the issue she's having with her mother and everything that she's gone through, she's having, she's trying to do her best just to find a connection with someone. And and these people are very charming. So she's extremely vulnerable, I think, and susceptible to be preyed upon, which again made me very nervous in the book, because I couldn't tell which, who she could trust, who she couldn't trust. And the mother was already in jeopardy, and then I'm worried that she was going to be in jeopardy. So you did such a great job of keeping me on the edge of my seat with the book.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask you, this book, it is obviously definitely a psychological thriller and in line in that sense with all of everything else that you've written, but it definitely, I think, goes even to that next level. What made you, was there something special about this book? I think it's your best book. I just love it. And I wonder the emotional depth and in this book, and the examination of those relationships is much deeper than in some of the other books that you've written, which are just as good, but just different. And I'm just wondering what made you go in that direction, or how did you get there from the night before to?
Well, thank you, first of all, for saying that. It's so interesting, because so many of my author friends have told me this is my favorite of your books, and bloggers, reviewers too, who have read other works of mine, and it's really hard. It's wonderful, but then you think, what is it? Like, what did I do differently? And I think that, I'm not a trained writer, so each book I've attempted something. I've attempted to do something, to accomplish something, and then I'll take away from that the things that worked and the things that didn't work, and then the next book I try to accomplish something else. And there will be things that worked and things that people found were, didn't work quite as well. And so with this book, I had 3 books already. I had the experience from those, and having tried different things and just different structures, different levels of suspense, different levels of backstory, different amounts of psychology and explaining, psychology and deep diving into it. And with this one, I feel like I got it down. I was like, okay, I know how to make something really page turning. And that was with the split time frame and the dual narration, it's mechanical. It's like, oh, I have this tool in my toolbox now. And that's how I feel as a writer, that I'm constantly getting new tools that I can use for the next book. So The Night Before taught me this and gave me this tool that I call it the monster in the closet. So in every chapter, the reader knows something that the character does not. And so it's like there's a monster in the closet and the character's walking around the room. And everything that goes on is now heightened suspense, because you want to the page and warn this character that there's a monster in the closet. And so you have that, but then at the end of the chapter, the monster is revealed and that gets resolved, but you learn a new fact that now the next character in the next chapter doesn't know. So now you're back with another monster in the closet, and you're also trying to piece everything together. But you're always wanting to reach in and say, no, it's this, it's that, and so you feel this urgency, like, when will she find out? So that's sort of a mechanical way of having suspense. And then of course you have to support it with facts and interesting things that, that are different in each chapter, so the reader doesn't know that they're, that's happening. But I took the emotional component. I really feel as though it's such an important piece, because if I don't care about a character when I'm watching a show or reading a book, I'll read it for an intellectual curiosity or even just the thrill of what's going to happen. But I don't have the same connection to it, and I don't have the same release and the same experience with it that makes me love it. And this is what I think is so important, even now that we're all feeling so much anxiety and we all need a release, but there's nothing we can do. We can't do anything about our situation except try not to make it worse. So we're stuck here, feeling fear, feeling anxiety, feeling sadness, feeling sometimes grief and loss. And to be able to do a deep dive with a character in a book and feel those things through that character, when it's not your own life, it's somebody else. You don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to save Nicole. You don't have to save Molly. You can shut the book and forget about it for the day, but you can experience all of those emotions and have your heart pound and maybe cry or whatever. And it's almost like a release of those emotions in a safe way, in a way that you're not in danger. No one in your family's in danger. You're not, there's nothing you have to do about it. You can just feel it and then be done. So I really tried to combine those things. Sorry, that's my dog. I tried to combine really a powerful emotional connection to these characters with the page-turning suspense to just give the reader all the things. As my young sister always says, all the things, give me all the things.
All the things, yes. Yeah, no, well, you definitely did.
I tried to give the reader all the things. So, and you introduce a parenting, bond in The Silent Conspiracy. And I don't think that's a spoiler, because we kind of know at the end of the network, right, that there's a child. Right. And how did you look at that? Because that's an emotional component, right? That's obviously, has to be built into your characters. Did that play a role? And how did you view that?
Yeah. So with Taylor, of course, she was pregnant in the network with a high-risk pregnancy. They're on the run. So the whole time she had gone through infertility. So this was a very desired pregnancy. Her husband had just been murdered. It was super stressful. She was worried about having, keeping this child. So when the Silent Conspiracy opens up, it's Evan, and he's almost 2 years old, and she idolizes him. In fact, she's had to get some therapy because she's had anxiety herself, worrying about how to keep this child safe. She's gone through all of this stuff, run for her life. She thinks that Damon Cross is dead and that she's safe, but she cannot get rid of this pervasive feeling and fear that something is going to happen to her son, or something that's going to happen to separate them. So that is something that she has to deal with, because she also doesn't want to raise him in a bubble. She doesn't want to make him anxious.
Right.
And Jack is also trying to help her. They're trying to work all of that out. So, and then of course, similar to what you're saying, the reader does see that this child is in jeopardy in a situation she's putting him in that she doesn't realize. The reader knows it, she doesn't know it, and so you don't really know how's that going to play out. And that mother-child relationship is also played out with Taylor's mother, who she lost as a teenager in book one, and who was murdered. So she had the grief. She carries that grief with her, missing her mother and not having been able to save her. And so that thread also comes into this book. So what I tried to do in the same way for you, I feel the same way. Like, it's all great to want to save the world and to have these big issues going on, but if you don't care about the people doing them, and you can't sort of relate to them on a personal level, it's not that you don't care what happens to the world. Of course you do, but you care much more if you know these people and you're living it with them. And so it on some levels, I try to bring in that domestic psychological sort of, thriller component is the microcosm of the bigger picture in the silent conspiracy, because we're seeing it all through them. And I mean, the main difference is there are more characters. I have definitely more point of view characters in these books than in the psychological thrillers. We typically would have 2, maybe 3, if that. This one, there's probably, I didn't count them, but I think there's maybe 5 or 6. I mean, primarily it's going to be Jack and Taylor and Damon, but then you hear from some of these other ancillary characters, but who are important characters and who are usually the not so nice characters. So, and even in those characters, in some of those, like the CEO of the health insurance company, who's not a nice guy at all, but you get to see what he's like with his wife, and you sort of get a look into what drives him as well, right? So it's not just a faceless corporate person making these decisions, but you're seeing, okay, why? And similar to what you said in terms of a sociopath, he doesn't feel bad about what he's doing because he's doing the right thing. He's making his company money. He's making his stockholders money. And if somebody dies 6 months sooner of cancer because they didn't get the test they needed, well, that's the breaks, that's in his mind. Or maybe they should have eaten healthier, or they should have smoked. Or, I mean, he can find a reason for justifying things, where other people would look at that and say that that's inexcusable. So I try to do this to bring that same level of believability to every character, so that it isn't cardboard character, black and white, Dudley Do, like whatever, with the mustache, putting the person on the train tracks, right? Yeah. But that these people, even the most hateful characters in their own minds, they're just kind of carrying out their mission and doing what they think they need to do. Which again, like to your bad guy and yours, who was horrible and crazy, but he doesn't think he's bad necessarily, right?
Getting by. I mean, that's why, I said it, in a town like that, people they're getting by at, any means at their disposal. And so there's a sense of survival going on for them. And I think that does something when you have spent your life fighting for your economic survival, and there's a ruthlessness that sort of steps in because you've experienced, great deprivation. And I think you sort of push aside the sort of concerns about other people, because your first concern is for yourself and your family. And so, yeah, it's a lot of interplay with that. But so I have to ask you, I'm really curious when you switch to writing multiple perspectives and writing in a more distant third person than you normally do in your psychological thrillers as Lynne Constantine, then is that a different writing experience? And is it different having to write on your own than with your sister? So I feel like you have two
people.
Lives. Yeah, you're like,
I know. That's what Alex Brady was like. Yeah.
It's really different narration style.
Yeah.
And also you don't have the luxury, as you've described to me before, of like getting sick of a chapter and making your sister finish it, which she does.
I know.
Well, but just
Yes, exactly.
having somebody else to say, oh, I can't describe another tree like you do it.
Yeah.
So what is that like? I won't ask you which one you like more, but what are the pros and cons of both? And like what's the experience like? The difference in the experiences.
Well, I mean, the pros of the collaboration are that, as you said, we share the work, we can help each other out if we're stuck. It's also really helpful when building the story initially, because of the brainstorming process back and forth really helps us to shape the story and take it to that next level. So for myself, when I'm trying to figure it out, I'm all in my head, and I mean, I can talk to somebody about it, and I do. I'll talk to my sister. I'll talk to her son, Chris, my nephew, who loves this kind of book. So oftentimes I'll run things by him, but there's no one who's going to sit with me for 5 hours or 10 hours and go through it like she and I do. So ultimately it's on my shoulders to make sure that that's going to come out. And so that part is more difficult. The upside on writing on your own, probably the primary, is a more practical one, and that is just scheduling. So I don't have to, with my sister and I, not that as well, actually now with COVID, that we are able to, there are really no scheduling conflicts, except she had some family visiting, and that was it. So she took a couple weeks off. But prior to that, she travels. She's at a different point in her life. I've still got kids in college and kids home, so I'm much more tied to the house, and I'm here. And she was traveling a bit more. So trying to figure out how we're going to get our schedules in sync, that at times is challenging. Whereas when it's myself writing, of course, I don't have to check with anybody, and I can work all night, or I can work all through the weekend. And having a story, I mean, it is nice to have a sense of something that is completely my own, even though I love writing with her. And it's not that I don't feel that they're my own, and she and I are so close. So it's not that I don't like to share that, but it is also nice to feel like, okay, I can write something on my own, right? Not to feel that's the only way that I can do it. So there are pros and cons to both, but I think I've come to really enjoy the collaboration more. And fortunately, for the most part, we are usually come to the same place when we're thinking about a story. Like once we've decided on what the twist is going to be, we've become very like-minded in the way we like to structure things. So yeah, I think that's an easier and more pleasurable thing for me. Not that I don't like this, but it is harder. It really is harder.
That's interesting. Well, I think we need to go to questions. I just realized the time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know, and I'm seeing all these questions, and I want to make sure that we get to them.
Alex?
Yeah, I'll pop on in a second.
Yeah. Do we have?
Hey.
I like to have my glasses on. I'm going to stare at the screen. Make sure we get to questions and let you wrap up and everything.
Yeah, so we do have a couple of questions, and I've got a couple. But if you have a question, please put it in the Ask a Question feature right below us. So let's start with Terry Lynn has a question. What is the best means to market your books during this pandemic besides the venue of small online events?
Well, I'll answer that first. For me, it's been Instagram. That community has been so supportive. And I think when the pandemic started, they just picked up the slack. So the libraries, the independent bookstores picked up they really rose to the occasion and started booking these online events, and they really got with it. And we're still able to sell books and have us reach audiences. But for me, I decided to back one horse, in addition to all these events, which was Instagram. And Instagram bloggers, they are passionate. They love to read. They're genuine. They're not doing it to become blogger stars. I don't see any advertising. There's even when they have 100,000 followers, they might be getting paid to do blog tours and things, but you don't notice it. I mean, they really are honest, and they love books, and they love to help authors. And that has been, for me, just getting word out into the everybody's online, so you have to get word out virtually, and that has been tremendous for me, and I'm beyond grateful. And my author community as well. Over 100 authors came out and posted for me on my pub date. I asked them to, of course, but they did it.
She was like threatening us all.
People don't know. People don't know what I don't know all my friends' pub dates. So I just send it. But I just, I emailed everybody I knew, and I'm like, guys, my book's coming out. Help, and everybody rose to the occasion. So the writing community, they're like amazing people. The blogging community, amazing. Lynn, what have you found?
I completely echo your same thing. I mean, I spend most of my time on Instagram in terms of social media. I'm on Facebook here and there, and same with Twitter, but I love to interact with bloggers and with readers on Instagram. I mean, they post amazing pictures and tag you, and they're lovely and genuine, and I've met a lot of them at events, which is another thing that I miss doing virtual. Also, independent bookstores, libraries, amazing, and again, the author community, the same thing for me. I mean, they are just I've yet in any industry that not that I've been in a million, but I've been in several, and there's nothing as supportive, or no one as supportive as other writers. They're just always willing to, I don't feel like they look at you like it's competition. It's like, we're all in this together, and we all love to read, and people can read more than one book. So we just can support each other, which is terrific.
How about Goodreads? Does Goodreads come into play for either of you?
You want to take that one?
I was going to say, you have more experience. I feel like it's more of a learning curve for me. But yeah, I mean, Goodreads is terrific as well. I don't really know how to interact as well. I think on Goodreads, that's a challenge for me, but there are definitely a lot of reviews. I mean, I think like The Last Mrs. Parrish has over 100,000 reviews on Goodreads, which I was thrilled to see. So I think the bloggers tend to go there more, right? When you say, Wendy, that because you'll see like a 3-to-1, like online reviews to Amazon, Apple, to Goodreads. I think I need to take a Goodreads class.
And my feeling is that Goodreads is a place for readers. That's a reading community, and there's our pages we can write a blog, we can answer questions, but we can't post the way we can post on Instagram, like, oh my gosh, here's my box of books that came, like, to keep people informed about our work. So
right.
Goodreads is really, they've kept it like a platform for readers to be honest about what they think. So if you can get a spark going on Goodreads and get a lot of reviews, readers will go there for recommendations. But as an author, to be able to reach the reader directly, same thing. I find it very difficult to do that. There's also a lot of paid advertising. There are a lot of giveaways, and there are a lot of paid advertising, which of course, I mean, it's a website. It has to monetize. It has to find a way to monetize and stay afloat and provide this wonderful service. So I'm not faulting them for that at all. But as an author, to have a free platform to communicate with my readers and have them, like my post and see my book or see a picture of me writing my book and stay connected, it's not useful for that. And so there's a disconnect between author and reader on that personal level. And so you're really just reliant on readers finding your book and the advertising that your publisher does for you on Goodreads for readers to find your book and post a review.
Right. And the giveaways are good, though. I mean, they're definitely great because you get a lot of books out there for that. So I think they're helpful. Yes. The book giveaways. Yeah.
The book giveaway, yes, they are. Yeah. But again, that's your publisher doing that. But as
right, exactly.
Yeah. I don't have like 50 books that I can
give away.
Right. So so that's all the publisher, and they do make use of that. But as an author, personally, what I can do, I feel is more limited because that's a community for readers, and I think they protect it a little bit.
So I was wondering, how has 2020 been for you guys in terms of writing? Has it been a difficult year to write, especially the last 6 months? Have you been productive? Have you hit some stopping points? How's it going?
Well, Lynn's been a machine. You've done so much stuff.
Yes, we were fortunate in that in March, when really everything came to a head, we were in the midst of editing, so we didn't need to call on creative energy to create, to do something new, which would have been difficult. We just knew we had a deadline, we had to get it done, which I was so grateful for. So we have been productive. We finished editing our 4th book during that time, and then we wrote a short story that's going to be, it's a prequel actually to The Last Mrs. Parrish, which is going to be an Audible original coming out in a couple of months. And then of course, I think I must have had editorial work also with The Silent Conspiracy once it's finished. So all of that back and forth kept us extremely busy. And it really wasn't until a couple weeks ago, as I said, my sister had family, and so we're in the midst of writing right now, but we took a break for a couple of weeks. And that was the first time really since the pandemic started that I took a break. And I found it a little difficult to get back. I could understand that malaise that some people were feeling. I started to feel that because now our deadline is self-imposed. We want to finish it, but I don't have anybody saying, no, you have to have this done. And I would find I was like, well, let me just go watch a movie, or so I could see I didn't, but I forced myself to get back. And so I'm back in the writing right now. How about you, Wendy?
So I had a really bizarre experience because when COVID hit, I was planning to start a new novel, and all my kids moved back home. But I went into, I think a lot of people did, into survival mode and high adrenaline. I was only sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, going to the store. And this was when we were still no one knew anything. So I was wiping down everything that came into the house. Every inch of the milk carton was being wiped down for 3 large men, boys, in between, lots of food. And so just the sheer amount of physical work to manage the household, and the anxiety, and not knowing, and for them not knowing where they were going. So I wasn't sleeping much. I knew that to stay sort of sane, I had to, number one, exercise. Started exercising every day, and I got like super strong for some reason. I was really handstands. I'm like, look at this stuff I can do. Like, it was crazy. But I was like, I'm going to be so strong. Like that's going to do any good against COVID. But in my mind, I wanted to take control. And then I wrote a novel in like 4 weeks. I would just get up at 4 a.m. I wrote that novel I wanted to write. I don't know if it's the novel I would have written under normal circumstances. And I haven't read it since then because I just don't know if it's the right novel. And I did the same thing Lynne did. I wrote an original short for Audible, which comes out October 1st. It's actually coming out in 2 weeks.
Oh, yay. Oh,
Hold Your Breath. And
awesome.
It's a sequel to All Is Not Forgotten. So it's a standalone, but it takes a character from All Is Not Forgotten. And what I did is I took the best part of what I wrote in March was this character. And I took her and I added her into this story because it was just a natural place for her to be. I needed a character like her. So I just wrote her into this short piece. And it was joyful because I loved my narrator from All Is Not Forgotten. I loved this character. I loved this story, and I just wrote it. And so now, and then I've been in promoting mode ever since. So
right. Have you ever?
I've been cultivating my contacts, building my presence. It's been an all day, every day, writing articles, blurbing other authors, producing videos. I produced a ton of content. I edit a lot of videos for other authors, interviewing them. I just interviewed my audiobook performer for Don't Look For Me. So if you like audiobooks, you have to go to my YouTube channel and see Therese Plummer talk about performing an audiobook. It's so inspiring and fascinating. I had no idea what that world was about. But anyway, that video is, that was so special to make, but that took like an entire weekend, but it was worth it. It's something I will cherish. So I've been doing that ever since. And now when this promotional stuff comes to sort of a little bit of a quieter place, I'm going to take that novel. I'm going to take everything I've learned about Don't Look for Me, what people have loved about it, and things that they think could be better. And I'm going to just sit and try to let calmness come in and try to be creative in a non-COVID state of mind and see what happens. So there will be another full novel.
Oh, very cool. So one question I've asked pretty much all the authors I've interviewed for StoryFest so far is, can you see yourselves setting a book in 2020?
No. Forget.
That has been the universe.
Yes.
My motto is hashtag forget 2020. Because
exactly.
The best compliment I've gotten about my book, I can't remember who said it, but they said, this book made me forget everything that's happened in 2020. Like for 6 hours, I forgot everything that was going on in the world. And I thought, so no. And I think we're going to get through this. And I don't know. I don't want to.
I think some things are going to change, though. I mean, the one thing I do wonder about, because yes, we are going to get through it, and we're going to come back to a world where we can go out without masks. But I don't know if we're ever going to go back to a world where we're in huge crowds or handshaking, or how long that's going to take. So those, I think there are going to be subtleties that may change, but I don't know if anybody's thinking about writing that into books. I mean, so maybe it's something you sort of leave out instead of handshaking, or I don't know.
Yeah,
I suppose, right? And
we're gonna write around it. What if you don't need a shaking scene? But I think it's dangerous to. I think you would date your book unless your book's going to be about 2020 and about COVID or about something similar. To write in people walking around with masks as just a setting device could be really back. First of all, remind people of something terrible that they don't want to remember. Right. But also, if that's no longer happening in 5 years, it's going to be a strange, strange book. So, yeah.
So Amy has a question. Can you see your book? I'm assuming she means the latest books being turned into a movie.
Hopefully, yes.
Yes. I don't have that question. Always. Mine, I'm thinking, I think will lend itself more to a limited series.
You do? I don't know. I think see it as a movie.
Well, the only reason is that to get into, it could go either way, but a limited series would allow you to get into the backstories of the bad actors and the town with more depth. So that's true. It would become less of an action movie than a sort of character-driven psychological drama, which is, we'll see. But we're out there looking. We'll see. Yeah,
and same thing. I feel like I feel like Network and Silent Conspiracy would lend themselves more to a series because there is so much going on. I mean, obviously be happy with the movie too, but I think that a series would be.
I discovered Scandal, which I know is an older series, but
I love Scandal.
Oh my gosh, it's like to have 7 seasons of a show.
Are you drinking wine and eating popcorn now? And are you drinking wine in the big glasses and having some popcorn?
Yeah, no, I definitely have wine and my dinner and watch Scandal. My kids are like, Mom, she's watching her one episode of Scandal.
Oh yeah, I love that show.
It's going on since March, so I'm like, I don't know.
I came to it late as well, but it was it was so good.
I could see your books being in that vein.
Yeah.
So just the last question before we wrap up, and I'm going to put you on the spot, and I apologize. Any book that you'd like to recommend that you've read recently? I know, I'm sorry.
That's fine. I will recommend Lisa Unger's Confessions on the 745, which is an amazing, I would have recommended Wendy's, but that's redundant. We've already talked about that. So that I love all of Lisa's books, and this one does not disappoint. It's very mysterious and it sucks you right in. So
I agree. I love Lisa's last book. It's really, really, it's one of the favorites of hers that I've read. She's written like 500 books, so I haven't read
I
them.
know.
There's several that I've read. This is my favorite. But I'm going to recommend something that is less well known, and that's The Watcher by Jennifer Pashley, which is a dark literary thriller, which is what I love to read. She is a literary writer. She's a trained writer, but she's atmospheric. The plot is dark. The characters are so well drawn. And it's a book that not a lot of people may hear about because she's new and she's coming out during COVID. So she's trying to, I mean, she has other books she's written, but this is a new coming into this genre is new for her, and to try to launch as a debut thriller writer, during COVID. So I'm going to give a shout out to that book, not only because I loved it and blurbed it and all of that, but because she deserves that. She deserves a shout out.
Cool. I will put that on my giant pile of to be read books.
Yeah, please do. Please.
Yeah.
And with that, I want to thank you both for taking the time to do this. Lynne and Wendy, thank you so much for being here, for being in StoryFest. We appreciate you both so much. And thank you all for watching tonight. And please be sure to check out more StoryFest offerings throughout this week and next week. And you can check it all out over at the Westport Library's YouTube channel. We'll put the link in the chat. The replay of this, if you want to catch it, will be right here at this link. And it will also be up on the YouTube channel in a couple of days. So thank you all again. Be safe and happy StoryFest, everybody.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this panel, head over to our StoryFest 2020 playlist and check out the rest of our virtual author events. And for more information about StoryFest, visit the library's website at www.westportlibrary.org.